Hi everyone and welcome back to SwitchUp and to that series where we play interesting games and stuff.
Yeah, we've got 6 games to talk to you about today, 3 each. Games that basically we've been playing over the last, week or so? 2 weeks, I guess. They can be new games, old games, there's no real stipulation, just games we want to talk about.
If you want to save yourself 10% on your eShop credit, you can get 5% off instantly using code SwitchUp and you get 5% back in coins.
So which games have we been playing recently? Well, let's find out.
Alright, first up then, we've got a game called, wait for it because I can pronounce this one, Koumajou, something. How'd you say that?
Koumajou.
Yeah, that sounds better.
I'll go with Koumajou, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like Scarlet something.
Scarlet Symphony, isn't it?
A lot of extra names. But this is like a side scroller that plays out through little small stages. You've got, is it a whip that she's got or something?
Yeah, it looks to be a whip, doesn't it? Yeah.
But then you can transition to being able to fly, and then it feels a bit more like a bullet hell. Not a bullet hell, it doesn't at all. It feels more like a shooter, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you played a little bit of this one. What did you reckon? What do you feel about this one?
Yeah, so it feels like very much like an early Castlevania game in terms of, you know, that you mentioned the weapon that you have there, the basic layout of stages. I'm talking kind of NES Castlevania, possibly things like the GBA in terms of the look though. Has that kind of early 32-bit look to it. But as you mentioned, you can then jump up and fly, and I think you pick up like spirits or something as you defeat enemies, and they are your bullets. So you have a finite amount of them, but obviously you can gain more by defeating the enemies. So I suppose that's what stops you from just whizzing through the stage and flying above everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It's quite good though. I do like it because it means, like some of the boss fights, you can actually kind of fly up out of harm's way. There's the second boss, there's like little platforms and stuff, and I literally just sat up on the shelf and I was like, right, let's just catch my breath. They never let you do that in games, do they?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I only played it for about 20 minutes. Obviously, you've played it for longer, but the first boss was hard, by the way. I got stuck on the first boss, I beg your pardon. But I did enjoy, you know, that hybrid nature of, as I say, like the Castlevania whip mechanics and that shooting. And you can also call in like other characters to assist you, can't you, when you're in battle? But again, that uses your spirit up or your souls. So it's quite a delicate balancing act of not using all your bullets up, but getting those friends in to help you. But it works very much like, you know, like in some beat 'em ups, or not beat 'em ups, but like 2D fighting games where you had like an assist character that would jump in, do something and jump out, but if you press it at the wrong moment, they would be completely wasted because there'd be no one for them to hit. You know, they have to make contact to be useful. So again, you just have to be careful about when you use them. Yeah,
that first boss bemes your next assist character.
Right.
So she joins you, and then you just see how it works.
It goes on and on.
And you end up with a big entourage of characters.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one. I do actually own this one. I said to you, Mark, before we started that this was one I bought from PlayAsia. I'll be honest, completely. It was based solely on the box art, which had like almost like a black and white look with some red on it. It just had a very cool look to it. So I did pick this one up and haven't played it yet. So I haven't had a little taster of it. I'll definitely give this one a go.
There's another game that I've been playing that I'm not going to talk about today. I think I probably should now. It's called Scortfelt. Have you seen it? Scortfelt something or other. And it's literally, the art is exactly the same.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that black and red looks very cool.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice mixture. Obviously, this doesn't use this in game, but that box art for sure on PlayAsia is pretty tasty.
Next up then is probably quite an interesting one because you didn't like the first game as much as I did, and it's Oxenfree II. So Oxenfree II came out last week?
It was recently, wasn't it? I think it was last week. Yeah,
I think it was last week. I didn't get time to fully review it, which was a shame, but it's also one of those that you don't really want to just rush through for the sake of it. I still have quite a few thoughts on it, probably enough for a review really.
Yeah.
So if you played the first game, you'll know that it's quite slow paced, set on the island, you're moving around, you're using your radio to kind of solve these weird Donnie Darko style events.
Yeah.
This one's similar. You play as older characters, which I think you'd like more.
Right.
Not because you're older, but because you can relate to them. Do you know what I mean? Like they seem a bit more real.
Yeah, the first one, I'd have to refresh my memory. It was like high school kids. Am I right? They'd gone to the island and they were sat on the beach or something, wasn't it? And then there was something with the radio signals, wasn't there?
Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I as you say, I didn't dislike it. I think maybe it was just one of those instances where you'd heard a game was incredible by so many different people, and when you played it, it didn't match that for you. So whereas it wasn't bad by any stretch and I thought it was perfectly fine, I was kind of left scratching my head a little bit as to what the fuss was about, you know.
Did you finish it?
Yeah,
you finished it as well. It's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes that feeling comes after the fact.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes having heard that first can almost impact the way you experience it because you're constantly waiting for that thing, that moment.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I think maybe it was a case of maybe other people's opinions didn't influence my own otherwise I'd be saying I loved it.
Yeah.
But maybe it swayed me in such a way that when I did play it, I was expecting more.
Yeah.
Or something different. I don't know. You know.
I think that's been a lot of people's experience. I've got to be honest, of Breath of the Wild.
Right.
People that you see them picking it up now, some are like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I like it, but I don't get that level of hysteria that happened.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about Tears of the Kingdom.
No,
you know,
that's the first game, yeah.
Yeah, the first game. I've seen a few comments. People are like, I'm enjoying it. Yeah, it's good, but not quite to that level.
I think sometimes there are some things, not just games, things, you have to be there.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that about this, but I think sometimes you have to experience it without being told anything. I think this, for me, having heard stuff, I just didn't really, my expectations were wrong, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the game overall, a slightly different story. Again, quite formulaic. The island is much larger this time around, and you've got a big map. You can see all the different areas. The problem, I guess, if you can call it a problem, is that if you expand a map, but you don't expand the rate at which you move.
Yeah.
Especially in this, where I don't mind the little intermission bits where they're chatting rubbish basically, you know, and you're making a few choices here and there, but there's a few times where you have to go all the way back to the start of sections and stuff like that, and it just feels a bit long.
Right.
But you know, I still enjoyed it. It just didn't quite have the same impact that the first did for me.
I think also I went into the first one expecting a horror game.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned Donnie Darko, that's a very good game to use as a barometer because it is that kind of abstract horror, if you like. If you can, you know, class it as horror. It has some elements that make you feel uneasy, but I was constantly waiting for something. And I don't mean jump scares. I don't mean like Freddy or Jason to jump out.
Yeah.
I just expected the slow build to equate to more than it seemed to, you know?
I think the sequel has tried to do that.
Yeah.
So you see like almost like zombified characters at one point. They've been like possessed by something that like float up into the air, and I think they've tried to do that, but conversely it's almost too much. It's like showing a monster early, you know? You see these people and you're like, oh, okay.
Lose its impact, yeah.
Great.
It's interesting. My one I want to talk about next, at least, is it's a game on the Super Nintendo Switch app, you know what I mean? And it's called Psychodream, which I'd never heard of, I'll be honest. And on reading the little tab that you have in there, it said it actually never left Japan. It was on the Super Famicom, which you can tell by the box art. It has the box art for the games in there, doesn't it? And it's basically a side-scrolling action game. You know, it's nothing special at all. The characters move quite slow. It can be quite cumbersome at times. You have two characters to choose from. You have a male. He looks a bit out of place. It's set in like this, I want to say cyberpunk, but it's more like virtual reality. Yeah. It reminds me very much of The Lawnmower Man. Oh, you know the movie? Yeah.
I like
but
film.
Funny enough, it also reminds me of the Super Nintendo game for The Lawnmower Man.
Okay.
So it's almost like they took the premise of the film and then the blueprint for the game and you know, but yeah, the man looks like he's out of a medieval thing, so that doesn't quite work. The woman's kind of got the what should I call it? You know, like the stockings and the whips and chains, you know, that sort of thing, which suits the world better. But it's quite interesting. As you go along, you pick up these things called proteins, and they will change your character. Sometimes they will change your weapon, and you can change from like melee attacks to range attacks. Oh, that's cool. And sometimes they'll change you completely. Like the woman grows wings and almost like becomes like this sort of bug hybrid, and the man becomes like a cyborg. So it just changes things up a little bit. And I did actually like the battle animations. You know, like the use of the weapons was very fluid, looked very smooth, especially as you gain some of the later ones. It's not the most difficult game in terms of the side scrolling, but the bosses are pretty damn tough. But they're tough at times because you just feel like there's nowhere to stand. Yeah. You just got to stand there and take it on the chin and hope that he dies before you know, which is a bit frustrating. But it's not a bad game. And really, I mean, the main reason that I want to talk about it is not so much the game itself. Yeah. It's because we speak about cyberpunk a lot. Things like obviously Blade Runner and that. But before I kind of discovered that as a kid, I absolutely loved the idea of hyperspace. Yeah. Before cyberpunk kind of became a thing for me.
So hang on, what's the difference? What's cyberspace?
Well, in my head at least, it's kind of that idea of virtual reality, and you know, like again, going back to the Lawnmower Man, where you had that sort of first-person view, and you had like your hands made out of terrible CGI, and you were walking through in that first person. You had like access granted, and you were walking through gates, and they were unlocking. That for me was like cyberspace, or you know, and obviously Cyberpunk was a bit different. It was more a future that was a bit more grounded in reality, albeit it did have these fantastical elements as well. And I just loved playing this game for that reason, because it brought me back to that early 90s time of loving that sort of setting, you know?
Glorious. You've reminded me of Inner Space. Do you remember that? I know it wasn't hyperspace, but just that like going inside something else. Like they go inside a body, don't they, in Inner Space?
Yeah.
That creeped me out, that film.
Yeah, I just loved as well, like, this game's got nothing to do with first person. I'm talking about first person. This isn't a first person game at all. But just that idea again of cyberspace and that, like I say, that first person view that was used in movies and stuff. I remember back then, because obviously first person games were few and far between. I mean, obviously you had things like Wolfenstein and Doom. But I remember like playing Toy Story on the Super Nintendo, and there was a first person level in there where you were inside the claw machine grabbing the little aliens. From a first person view, and it played like arse compared to the rest of the game, but it was so different. You're like, wow, a first person level, this is amazing, you know? And that again relates back to that cyberspace setting that I used to love.
When you look at someone and you're waiting for a certain word to come out of their mouth and arse comes out.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go with arse. I had a few alternatives, but arse felt right.
Monetize it. Oh, arse felt right.
Not literally.
All right, after that bombshell, well, I've got one that's really serious now. It doesn't feel quite right, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Next up, we've got a game called Inner Ashes. Now, I saw this one on one of your upcoming games videos. It was like a first-person adventure. You get quite a lot of those on Switch, don't you? Those kind of first-person. Some of them look lovely, some of them look like arse. But this one looked really nice. I didn't, at that point, know the story behind it.
Okay.
It's essentially someone that's dealt with a lot of Alzheimer's disease in their life, so relatives and things like that. And then the developers have created a game that puts you in that position. What's really quite clever about it is it never really explicitly tells you that, which I guess is the point, right? So you're kind of confused when you start. You literally say wake up, you become conscious in your house, and the first thing is you see a little blue post-it notes all over the walls, and it'll be like, this is today's newspaper, you need to go and do this, and then there's a board that's got like a list of jobs and things that you need to do. Like, I think the person's a wood carver. But it's very, very scary. A very scary game, because the guy, through reading and little audio things that come in, you realise he had a young daughter, you know, and we've both got young daughters, and there's a lot of moments in it that are obviously potentially from this person's real life that felt like my life and your life. You'd recognise, you know, first days at school, doing stuff together, then being scared about something and you talking them through it, and then the horror really of losing those memories. The whole thing is him trying to just cling to those memories. It's really quite unnerving. Scarier than a lot of scary games.
It's terrifying. It is terrifying. You're not wrong. And I mean, games can be such a powerful medium when they get that right. You know, there are other examples, not necessarily to do with Alzheimer's, of course, but things like Rime. I know was a game that really, it's going to sound strange saying it without context, but it messed me up when I played it. I can't say much more about spoiling the story, which I don't want to do, but all I will say is that I finished the game, I completed the game whilst my daughter was in the room. She must have been, I don't know, 2 maybe at the time, and if you know the ending of that game, you know what I'm talking about, and then seeing your daughter, seeing your kid made me cry. You know, like,
it's a killer.
It's games can be, you know, used for good in terms of awareness and obviously, you know, empathy, you know.
Absolutely. Like one of the first things, because you go within, you've got a sketchbook, the person's obviously an artist, so the sketchbook is where the memories are stored, so you go there and you kind of dives into this magical world, and one of the first things you see actually, and I think this is really good at the developers, it's like there's these almost information blocks that you can like look at, and it basically has a list of like early symptoms for Alzheimer's.
Oh wow, okay.
Which again is scary, right? Because you're like, have I got any of these things? And Glen knows, but a few days ago I was at a funeral for someone who had died from Alzheimer's, like literally 2 days before playing this game, so it was a bit like, oh my word, you know, it's absolute carnage. But it like you said before as well, it does it in a way that it's not shoehorned. Like obviously it's intentional, but it's not shoving it like down your throat. It's very slow paced, the build up. It makes you realise that you've got in the game you've got Alzheimer's, you know. But also there's a bit of hope there, because through help from other people, the person's got quite a good quality of life. Whereas when we think about, you know, it's just doom and gloom, isn't it? And it's scary.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's not scary, but I love that the game's actually got both sides of that.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I'd never even heard of this game until you very briefly mentioned it before we started recording. But as I said a minute ago, not to bat home the point, but it is nice that games can be used in such a way these days, because the technology has advanced to a point where it can treat its source material with respect.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And to be honest, just one more game that isn't a roguelike Metroidvania.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Something
Hybrid,
different,
just something different. Somewhere they've gone, sod it, I don't care about making a load of money, I'm going to make the game I want to make.
Yeah, exactly right. Right, my next one then is called Getsufumaden Undying Moon, which is from Konami, and it came out a while ago on the Switch. I think it was about a year ago, but the physical version has only just released, or within the last month or so, and I picked it up. And funny enough, it is a roguelike, but it's a very hard one for me to talk about, because when I first played it, so I bought it the other day, saw it in the shop. It's not one you see very often out and about, and I played the first few runs, died relatively quickly, and I was like, it's so close to Dead Cells, should I just play Dead Cells? You know what I mean?
Wow, okay.
But on doing some reading on a Reddit post, which was really helpful, and if I can find it again, I'll link it.
Yeah, nice.
Because to be honest, it did a much better job of explaining the game than the game does.
Yeah.
The game, it does that amazing thing of saying loads but explaining nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
oh, yeah.
Copious text boxes, you learn nothing, But actually, when you do start to get to grips with the game's mechanics, it's actually, I really started to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, to the point where it would potentially be one of my go-to games for roguelites, So you play as a warrior that's looking for his brother, I believe it was, and you go through stages. It's done in a beautiful art style. It's like the like the woodblock Japanese printed.
It looks incredible.
Looks lovely, doesn't it? That kind of, I don't know when it would be, sort of 17th century, 18th century maybe, I'm not quite sure when, apologies, but around that time. Looks amazing. Because of the way your character moves, your character has that kind of what do you call it, like ragdoll style of movement.
Oh, is it like the puppety style?
Kind of puppety, which does make sense, I suppose, in terms of the art style.
Yeah.
But it does at times make it look like there are frame pacing issues when there actually aren't. It just looks a bit jarring at times. But aside from that, in terms of the actual gameplay, as I said, there's so much that's not really explained, and I do think it has quite major balancing issues, which does hold it back, but I still enjoyed it. So when you go on a run, if you die, you lose all of your items. So anything you've collected, you lose. Money, you lose everything.
Oof.
But there are bits you can bring back to start to permanently upgrade your character.
Right.
But what I discovered is probably like the most important thing I discovered was do a few runs of the first level.
Yeah.
Which after a while is pretty easy. There's a big boss at the end, big skeleton, but he goes down pretty quick. Do a few runs of that. There's a gate to go to the next level. But if you walk past that all the way to the end, you go back to the hub area. And although you lose all of your weapons, so the next time you play, you'll play from level 1 and you'll start with your base character.
Yeah.
You keep all of your items. And if you just do that a few times and build up your character and start to upgrade a few bits on your character, then start playing it for real. Do you know what I mean?
Nice. Reddit is the way, isn't it, sometimes?
Definitely.
Especially in a world without manuals.
Yeah.
It's upsetting.
Yeah, it's funny because you always, I certainly do, I sometimes think games tell us too much, just let us play.
Yeah.
And I do still think that with this game because, there were text boxes and it was boring to read. And I actually took it, when I first played it, I took it to my son's swimming lesson. So I was playing it whilst keeping an eye on him, and I was like, maybe I just missed it, maybe I didn't read it properly.
Yeah.
And then reread it and I was like, no, it's terrible at explaining things, But there's like another feature where you can, you get, I think it's called soul devouring or something like that. And you fight these enemies that flash, and if you beat one, they drop a soul.
Yeah.
And then on the bottom, you've got 4 character base stat points, like health, main weapon, sub weapon, potions, like the potions that give you your health back. And if you collect enough of those, that will move to each of those areas. And if you right click in, you can enhance one of those areas.
Right.
But I didn't realise that what I was doing was getting one and using it.
Yeah.
But actually, if you keep it and get another one, it will move it along to the next area, and you can choose where you want to put those points in.
Risk and reward.
But again, Reddit was my friend for that.
Reddit is your friend. Yeah. Always. Yeah, I've actually played this. I played the first half of the first level.
Right.
Just enough to go, yeah, this is decent.
Yeah, it is decent, but it's definitely a game where you need to know a bit of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because honestly, my first couple of runs, I was like, well, it's Dead Cells, and Dead Cells is better.
Yeah.
I'll just play Dead Cells. Dead Cells is still better, but it's better than it first comes across, this game, you know?
Well, a lot of people love this.
Yeah.
A lot of
I
people
can see
really
why.
love this.
And just a quick point on this before we move on to the next game. If you buy it physically, I don't know about the digital version, you get the original Getsufumaden from the NES.
Oh, that's cool.
The Famicom, actually. It didn't come out outside of Japan. And it was, the only reason I want to mention it was because it's obviously by Konami.
Yeah.
Came out in 87. You can 100% see that they took that blueprint and made the NES Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game a couple of years later, because it has the same sound effects, has the same level layout to a degree. They basically went, you know that game we didn't release anywhere else? Yeah. Slap Turtles on it, you know, tweak it a bit, and we'll release that. We'll make an absolute mint.
It became one of Glen's favourite games of all time.
Yeah, and they made a mint, so fair play to them, yeah.
Lovely. Okay, I think that takes me on to the last game then, which is called Sephonie. Now, I need to find the name of the developer quickly. They're called Analgesic Productions, and they made Anodyne and Anodyne 2. Do you remember that?
I do. Yep, I do, yeah.
I think the thing with these guys is they're very well known, they're almost renowned, you could say, for their storytelling. So the gameplay can very often feel very clunky.
Right.
Anodyne, the first one, I didn't find that. It had that top-down, almost like Zelda-like view, but then it's told this really macabre story with some absolutely bonkers characters, and I loved that. I thought it was great. The sequel, Anodyne 2, then went into like the PS2 era almost. I think it's like PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 kind of.
Yeah, it definitely jumped up a few generations, didn't it?
Somewhere in the middle, but again, their storytelling's brilliant. Now, Sephonie is really strange. It describes itself as like a 3D puzzle platformer, and it has built-in speedrunning elements. Now, the thing is, the controls are so weird.
Right.
So you hold the right RZ to sprint, and it's one of those where just by clicking it, you'll be running forwards.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of move the stick to like, almost like tank controls.
Right.
Which is weird to start with. Then you've got a jump button. Rather than letting you do a double jump, you can only double jump when you're close to a surface. But then you don't do that by pressing jump again. You do it by pressing the run button.
Right.
It's just weird.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it feels weird when you're playing it. It takes some real getting used to. There's things like a wall run, and you're like, wall run, and then jump off of it. And then your brain's like, all right, I just want to double jump. So you'll press that. It doesn't do anything. You have to press the ZR.
Right.
It's just, you can hear it's just fiddly.
Yes, it doesn't sound great, to be honest.
No, I don't know what they're thinking.
What is it? So is it like a parkour game or something?
No, so you start off like this, it's in the future, I think it's 2043, something like that. If I've got that right, I'll be well impressed. And there's three scientists, and they've found this, I don't know if it's an alien planet island or whether it's an Earth island. I think it's an alien planet. And they're researching this island, which is weird to start with, you're just there. And you go around the island, a bit like No Man's Sky, finding different flora and fauna,
right,
and scanning it. And then when you scan it, it becomes basically a version of Tetris.
Oh, okay.
It's bonkers, isn't it? It sounds mad, doesn't it? Literally, you've got like this grid from the top-down perspective. So I will say the Tetris-like game is surprisingly good. Like, surprisingly enjoyable.
Yeah.
Weird little element. And you've got to make rows of 3. So you've got the normal Tetris shapes, but you've got a different shaped grid that you're dropping these things into.
Yeah, okay.
Eventually, obviously, you're not going to have something slot in. You pull a trigger and it tops up all your points, and you're trying to like fill a bar at the top of the screen. Once you fill that, then you've what's it called? Like examine the plant, and you get all the information about it.
Right.
If you fail, then you lose some health from another bar. I know. It's describing it's bonkers. It's strangely quite enjoy that part. It's optional. You know, you can go around and it sometimes does kick the story on a little bit further. I can't say it makes much sense, but then that is the nature of Analgesic Productions. Very often it does red herrings on purpose. Right. So they'll lead you on this path and you'll be like, oh, this is a game about this, and then suddenly something outrageous will happen and you'll be like, what just happened there? So you've got this weird parkour element, you've got this adventure, you've got this unusual, slightly clunky controls. You've got this alien, right, who's on a train.
Yeah, of course you have. Yeah.
And the alien on the train is the island, right? And every now and then it goes to a cutscene and he's called the Observer. Right. And he's like, and then they're like, who the hell are you? And he's like, I am the island. And the island is called Sephonie. Do you feel like you're having a head trip just listening to me talk about this game?
Yeah, I feel like I'm stuck in Stephen King's Bad Dream. Do you know what I mean? I just can't...
Yeah, I mean, without completely spoiling the entire game, it still manages to take all these weird clunky elements and be good. And I don't know why. I know. I don't know what it is about this developer. Normally, like 9 times out of 10, I'd be like, oh my goodness, this is shovelware, this is absolute crap. But it isn't, and I can't even put my finger on why. It's got so many clunky elements. It's got like checkpoints throughout it. And like if you activate this checkpoint here, and then you fall down, you'll go back to that checkpoint. But if you fall down and activate a checkpoint down there by mistake, you'll start back down
to
there.
Yeah, I've seen that in games before.
Oh, bro.
That's not good.
It's not good, but then it still manages to be interesting, and way more interesting than like 90% of the games I play.
Yeah.
You tell me, because I don't understand.
I'm racking my brains, mate.
Let's have a look at the Steam score. Let's have a quick look. Oh, wow, okay, so it's got 9 out of 10 on Steam.
All right.
Universally praised. Oh, wow, it's received a load of 10 out of 10s from people. 10 out of 10, man. It's definitely not a 10 out of 10. It's a masterclass in proving that the 3D platformer genre still has plenty of tricks up its sleeve. Whew, well, there you go.
You know, I'm not talking about this game because I haven't played it, but sometimes I feel like some 10 out of 10s or, high scores for games, it feels a bit like the Emperor's New Clothes. Do you know what I mean? Like they're looking at something which is blatantly a naked man in the street, but everyone else around them saying it's good, so they have to pretend he's got clothes on and give it 10 out of 10.
For the sake of advertising, there's no naked men in this video.
No, not at all. We're both fully clothed. But like I was saying about Oxenfree, where I was like, no, actually, I'm going to stand up, put my head above the pulpit and say, it's all right.
Yeah.
All those around me, looking at the naked man in the street, went, look at his beautiful garments. I couldn't see any garments, mate.
No.
He was absolutely starkers.
No, what's that? Really, exactly right. Exactly. I have to, I actually think the parkour elements of this feel really clunky. And I think the controls, they could have improved massively. I don't like the controls.
There you go. You feel better for saying it, didn't you?
Much better.
There we go. Lovely.
But I still enjoy the Wet Teller's story.
Fair enough.
Lovely set of clothes.
Beautiful garments. Right, there we go. That's 6 games, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is 6 games. Okay, so please do let us know anything that you've been playing that you have enjoyed or not. You know, if there were any naked, metaphorical naked people that everyone else told you had clothes on, do let us know, please.
And as always, like Glenn said, I think he's mentioned a few physicals in this video. We always talk about a 10% discount that you can get over at switchup.gg using code SwitchUp. We also do have a Play Asia discount, don't we?
We do, and I did use that to purchase the game that I mentioned, or you mentioned rather, right at the start. So yeah, that's there too if you want to import any games. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members, of course, for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.